Welcome to today's broadcast Valentine's Day special. I'm going to be talking a little bit about various issues that we contend with living in this era. And one of them is disinformation, and disinformation and propaganda take a group effort to dismantle. So this is my 2 cents worth of contribution to that much needed global fund, because we're not just tribes, we're not just our skin colors. We are human beings actually engaged in kind of an existential fight for our existence. And some of our global superpowers, such as the United States, a country where I currently reside, have a lot of money polluting the political system. And I don't want to both sides this, because I think the purchasing power has fallen very heavily in favor of Republicans, whose conservative stacked Supreme Court judges have enabled the floodgates to open for corrupt piles of money to be directed towards politicians for purchasing power. And that those sums of money have become so large that they're more easily corruptible by malign foreign interests. And I'm thinking of Putin here. So the picture I have up on the screen for Valentine's Day today is Vice President Kamala Harris and her husband, Doug Emhoff. And he's written a very nice message. I just wanted to start with something positive. He wrote, "On Valentine's Day and every day, I'm constantly in awe of you. With much love, D." Oh, relationship goals. He's holding a chocolate cupcake with a heart in it. I was going to make some of those for Valentine's Day, but I did make some on the weekend for my daughter and her friend. So there you go. I have had a Valentine's Day celebration of my own today. Went out to lunch and had something nice. Yep. Anyway, that's not relevant. Let's get down to the political nitty-gritty here. There's so much to talk about. There is always so much to talk about. It can sometimes feel discouraging, and that's just something we all have to contend with. The discouragement that comes from beating your head against the brick wall of ignorance, stubbornness, just generally human things. And the Michigan mass shooting from yesterday is something very illustrative of something that really gets me down, which is the obduracy, a fancy word for stubbornness, the obduracy of those Americans who keep voting in Republicans when Republicans are essentially covert lobbyists. They're a front group for gun manufacturing lobbyists, and their interest is in preserving and expanding the profits of gun manufacturing at the expense of your safety and your children's safety, our collective safety, our freedom to exist safely in this country. So it's disturbing, but there's a powerful quote from John Lewis. I'm going to read it out loud to cheer myself up. John Lewis quote: "Do not get lost in a sea of despair," I believe it starts. "Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble." Such an important quote, so timely every day, because it is always an ongoing struggle. There's always our better natures striving against our worst selves. And don't get lost in a sea of despair. So be hopeful, be optimistic. Excellent. And he knew a lot about contending with something for a lifetime, because the struggle against racism is a foundational struggle. Racism is a coping strategy to preserve, to win artificial advantage for yourself at the expense of others. So at a systematic level, it's a way to dress up, to rationalize immoral profiteering through oppression. And on a more day-to-day life, it's just part of habituated tendencies to put other people in danger, to be callous towards the lives and welfare and well-being of other people. When you're not even aware of it necessarily, and it's just part of your the quilt of painstakingly sewn assumptions and prejudices. So Bob's here, hello Bob, and says, I see now that instead of Republicans spinning, they are just out and out lying. Well, I have a bookmarked quote today. Let's have a look, because there's one Republican who is questioning someone. Oh, he's questioning someone who's being up for appointment to the FCC. All right, so it's an FCC commissioner hearing. All right, so let's have a look. FCC is the Federal Communications Commission. So the candidate for this role is someone who's said some fairly hostile things about Republicans on Twitter, never estimating that she will be up for such a role, I guess, because some people will keep their opinions to themselves. I'm grateful for everyone who speaks up bravely against the very pervasive practices amongst Republican state legislatures, amongst Republican groups, of strategizing ways to suppress the vote. So this Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska said, apparently, he said, you said Republicans know the only way they can win an election is to suppress the vote. You also said maybe next election, Republicans will stop beating up on gays and women. Do you understand how offensive these statements are and how untrue? So I'm glad he's addressing these accusations. I'm glad he's speaking them out loud, because the truth is Republicans are unlikely to ever stop gaslighting us. They're unlikely to ever stop their practices of manufacturing outrage and saying, how dare you accuse us of doing these things, whilst they busy themselves doing those things. That's rewarding for them, and people don't stop doing something rewarding unless they meet a force that is greater, has a greater negative impact than the reward. And it's unlikely that the well of rewards will dry up for Republicans anytime soon. Let us just hope that there is some disadvantages for lying that accrue to them through the legal system and through the fact that Republicans do keep losing. It can be hard to celebrate Republican losses because there are some incredibly unjust wins that they've nevertheless been able to tick off. And injustice is something that really grinds the gears of human nature. We just can't let it be sand in the mill that grinds the mill to a halt. We still have to keep working. We still have to keep striving. We still have to keep being optimistic and hopeful, because that is the type of energy that propels you forwards. Giving up, lying down, helplessness. It's okay for a day under the covers in a worst case scenario, or longer if you've suffered a significant personal tragedy, but it can't be an approach to American politics. We can't cede ground. We can't give up, because Republicans will take things from you. They will take, and they have taken things. Many women living in Republican-governed states now have compromised access to the medical care that they need to continue their lives in peace. So women living in Republican-governed states don't have the freedom to to access doctors who can concentrate to the full extent they need to on treating a woman going through a problematic pregnancy. Republican women don't have the freedom to access appropriate medical care because their medical care is now compromised by concerns that there might be a violation of state law if they're having a miscarriage, if the miscarriage is incomplete and needs medical care to preserve that woman's life, or just to preserve the integrity of various bodily functions, or to preserve the functionality of their organs, such as their uterus. Some people lose their uterus when an ongoing miscarriage doesn't receive medical treatment in a timely fashion. And that's the kind of freedom. Those are the kind of stories that we have to share, because it's our only defense once they've done what they've done, which is use the Supreme Court to take away women's peace of mind, their peace of mind and their peaceful ability to access timely medical care. All right, let's listen to Rep. Dan Sullivan from
another issue that's very troubling to me, and it's your open disdain for Republicans. Okay, now you've said, quote, Republicans know that the only way.
It's loading a bit slowly, isn't it?
Wow. Now, you've said, quote, Republicans know that the only way they can win an election is to suppress the vote. Wow. That's not my view. It's not the view of Republicans.
It's not your view. It just happens to be the reality in Ohio, in Indiana, in so many states with Republican supermajorities, or even just Republican simple majorities. They have taken steps to make voting harder if you live in a minority dominant area. They've made less voting machines available. They've made COVID voting access measures more complicated and difficult. They've instituted a lot of steps to discourage people from voting, knowing that the people who are most easily deterred from voting because their life circumstances are more stressful, they have jobs that are more difficult to take time off for. The people with less power in their lives are more easily deterred from voting. So when you make voting more difficult, you inherently turn away those less fortunate, and those less fortunate are often likely to vote for Democrats who seek to address those who have the raw end of the stick in the American economy. Democrats often try to institute policies to help Americans and to preserve the social safety net, as opposed to a lot of the libertarian-themed lobbyist group Republicans who have as their ambition to purge Social Security, to pull it up by the root, who feel comfortable in their own levels of personal wealth and seek to expand that wealth by pandering to greedy, selfish, vulture capitalists who aren't just capitalists, but they're the kind of capitalists who seek their own advancement by stepping on you and using the bodies of the less powerful as stepping stones on their pathway to advancement.
Here, the only way Republicans can win is to suppress the vote. You also said maybe, quote, maybe next elections, Republicans will stop beating up on gays and women. I mean, do you understand how just ridiculously infuriating statements like this are?
Well, Republicans talk about wanting to protect women, and they might protect some people's conception of women as being celebrated for being stay-at-home. That's certainly an emotional service that Republicans do for a lot of Republican voting women. They can feel celebrated. They don't have to feel pressured to enter the workforce. They can be told that that's the noblest thing in the world to do. And Democrats can take a leaf out of that book and say, yep, props to you. Unpaid labor is labor. It is hard work, and we pay it often not with cash, but with compliments. Paid in compliments, not cash. Paid in gratitude, and that is part of the currency of our society. Some women don't find that very rewarding, and particularly women who are the breadwinners in their family find that they can't easily keep their family comfortable on compliments from society alone. A lot of women need to work, and a lot of women work and want to be appreciated for their talents and capabilities as well. So there's definitely room to celebrate an ideal of femininity that says women can serve honorably in an unpaid fashion in the home and be celebrated for that, and be paid in the love and appreciation of their family, but just accept that society is less restrictive now, and that it doesn't say the only wonderful pathway for women is to be at home with children. There's still a lot of apparently discrimination and exclusion and social bullying towards women who choose not to procreate, who choose not to participate in the whole settling down and having kids. There's a stigma associated with avoiding that type of life journey. But my point is, let's find a point here, is that Republicans hide behind this: we promote and celebrate women because we're so pro-family and pro-women staying at home. But at the same time, even women who stay at home may need an abortion, may need a termination in the fourth trimester. Hey, wait, there's no such thing as a fourth trimester. The fourth trimester, I'm familiar with that as terminology because babies can be so startled by the process of being born that you are reminded as a new mother to practice compassion for a new baby by saying, imagine it's in its fourth trimester. It's expecting to still be in the comfort of the womb, but it's the baby is having to contend with all of these startling new sounds and sights and bright lights, etc. It's no longer floating in an amniotic sac in your womb. But yes, there are only 3 trimesters, and a woman may need an abortion towards the end of her pregnancy if there is a medical problem for her or for the fetus, and that happens. It can't be brushed under the carpet. It happens. And if you don't have doctors who are trained in how to perform abortions, if you don't have doctors who feel supported by a state's legal system, if you have doctors who feel that their every action is being second guessed by a conservative legislature and that they could face prison or losing their medical license or fines of $10,000 for helping a woman, that or a girl, that makes it much more fraught, makes it much more of a fraught affair to have any type of medical complications during a pregnancy, and particularly as your pregnancy advances. So having to travel in the 3rd month for an abortion that you might need to save your life. Sorry, 3rd trimester, not 3rd month. That's a gift courtesy of Republicans beating up on women and gay people, which is done by
you've said, quote,
calling them groomers all the time. And there's definitely a campaign afoot to try and stoke public outrage against gay people and pretend that there's a genuine threat to children purely from exposure to changing social mores around acceptance of gayness. That's not, well, I'm making an assertion that that's not the main problem affecting children's mental health nowadays. There certainly is an increase in children having mental health problems, and there's definitely an understaffing of school counselors and medical professionals who can deal with or help support children experiencing these type of problems. But you also have to look at big picture, what's going on in a society, and society is showing children that a lot of people are willing to take the coward's way out of denialism when confronted with problems, serious existential level problems, as well as just pure social problems of, haven't we decided that it's a good idea to let people be diverse and express their sexuality and their gender identity and not just be pressured to conform to heteronormativity? Haven't we learned that when adults bully, it creates a permission structure for children to bully each other, that they are copying what they see, the values that they see adults uphold, and children will very readily go for the lowest hanging fruit available to them. Children will go for the low blows because they haven't been through the process of being socialized to be thoughtful and considerate as much as an adult has been. So yes, children can be merciless in bullying each other, but the true instigators of those bullying behaviors are adults who show children who they should denigrate, adults who model to children which type of people are lesser, adults who model hierarchical behavior, who model disdaining others as a pathway to self-promotion and feeling good and entertaining yourself, that it's okay to be mean to others to uplift yourself, that it's okay to point out somebody else's flaws in order to uphold the story you tell yourself about your own value. Speaking of terrible people who model awful behaviors to others, here's Elon Musk, who admits that his company SpaceX has taken active steps to prevent Ukrainian forces from using critical Starlink satellite tech with Ukrainian drones, which is a key component of their fight against Russia. And when I say fight against Russia, I'm going to say their defensive fight against Russia, their fight to minimize the number of deaths caused by the Russian invasion, to minimize the loss of land, of protection, the protection of having a sovereign nation that defends its own borders, because their borders have been overwhelmed by Russian incursions. And Ukraine is supposed to be able to look to its allies. Its allies have provided a lot of help, but it's still inadequate for what is needed. And what is needed is to be able to thoroughly repel the Russian invaders. We've also learned today that thousands of Ukrainian children are being sent to Russian camps. So I guess we can look at that detail as well. Hi, Christopher. Nice to see you. Thank you for encouraging me today. I needed it yesterday. I was feeling sad. But here we go. This is the reporting from NBC News that a Russian network of camps has become the destination for thousands of Ukrainian children, and they're being mass re-educated. So you can bring up your children, but if they're stolen from you and then exposed to repetitive messages about how Russia is wonderful and Ukraine is terrible and your parents have abandoned you, then that's a potent and horrific thing to do to the children you've stolen. All right, I will change what I'm sharing. So that we can see this article and have a look. Okay, the level of mass re-education is a very clear, systematic attempt to erase the history, culture, and language of Ukraine, said one of the report's authors. Consider this report a gigantic Amber Alert that we are issuing on Ukraine's children. This is Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab. The executive director is Nathaniel Raymond. That's who that quote came from. Oh, and look, they've got a little Ukrainian boy riding his scooter past a bombed building, which is a potent speaking image, contrasting the destruction that we all know is happening in Ukraine, but also the fact that day-to-day life does go on. There are children wanting to play. All right, let's read about a sprawling network of camps, part of a systematic effort to relocate and re-educate thousands of children. So the government sponsored the study. The Yale School of Public Health's Humanitarian Research Lab conducted the study independently. They were established to gather evidence of human rights violations in Ukraine after Russia's invasion, and said they had definitively documented around 6,000 Ukrainian children being taken from their homes. But the total number of minors potentially forcibly transferred to Russia and Russian-occupied territories is likely much higher, even in the several 100,000. So this is what's happening to Ukraine. While Republicans complain about a small portion of America's military budget being sent on basically refreshing America's military supplies anyway. America is constantly buying new military supplies and spending billions of dollars, trillions of dollars on that. So it's money well spent to help an ally, a country literally that America signed documents vowing to protect Ukraine from any other nation's aggression. And also, Russia is an adversarial nation, and if you don't stop it from acquiring Ukraine, if Russia succeeds in acquiring Ukraine and continuing this process of acquiring Ukrainian children and re-educating them and training them to hate Ukraine and love Russia, then Russia is a rewarded and emboldened aggressor who goes on to acquire the next neighboring country and so forth and so on, and becomes stronger through that pursuit and through that acquisition. So it's very much in American interest to be a spoke in the wheel of this Russian drive to invade and massacre and steal children from its neighbors. So the Russian program is a systematic whole-of-government approach to the relocation, re-education, in some cases, adoption and forced adoption of Ukrainian children, involving at least 43 facilities in Russia and spanning all levels of the Russian government. The age of the children documented in the report ranged from 4 months to 17 years. Oh gosh, it's hard and very more emotive than you might think when you start reading something to come across that. It's very evocative to contend with that fact of their actual ages, to imagine a 4-month-old baby that Russian soldiers have perhaps killed their family or just raided their homes and just taken a baby. They're under instructions, take the children. They've taken a 4-month-old from Ukraine to Russia. They've transported it across a border to be put in a system. And of course, the death rates of institutionalized children are far higher than the death rates of children left with their own families in normal circumstances. It's much easier to neglect and abuse and create conditions that are not conducive to flourishing or even surviving amongst children who are just in camps, who are just at the end of a bureaucratic process, looked after by people who aren't as invested as actual parents. So these are stolen children. The level of mass re-education is a very clear, systematic attempt to erase the history, culture, and language of Ukraine. So when people, to quote Maya Angelou, when people show you who they are, believe them. So it's a Russian goal to create and strengthen a crumbled Russian empire. They're trying to reconstitute a dehydrated Russian empire. Just add water and tell your captives that Russia is wonderful, and then repeat by the 1,000. Some children were sent to military training camps in the Russian Republic of Chechnya and Russia-occupied Crimea, according to the report. These are some of the people who have the highest access to people who go straight to the top, to President Vladimir Putin himself, and of course to the top of the Chechen Republic. But Ukraine's government did not immediately respond to requests for comment on the report's findings, but they are busy. But yes, from the early days of the invasion, Kiev has accused Russia of forcibly transferring children and adults. So these are people who've gone and obtained receipts. They're like, yes, we have evidence of at least 6,000, likely thousands more children aged from 4 months to 17 years, forcibly taken from Ukraine from their families and transferred to re-education camps, military camps, or forcibly adopted into Russian homes. Russian officials have consistently denied the accusations, calling them a fantasy. In August, the Russian Department of Information and Press, i.e. disinformation, said in a statement to NBC News that the allegations were groundless and are conjectures aimed at discrediting Russia. Study's authors added that the actions described in the report are a violation of the Geneva Convention, which prohibits the change of a child's personal status, including nationality, and may constitute a war crime or crimes against humanity. Okay, so the Geneva Convention prohibits the change of a child's personal status, including nationality. You can't say, that was a Ukrainian child, we're taking it, that child is now Russian, it is property of the Russian government, and we will control what happens to that child. We choose destination military camp or destination adoption to a Russian home. The charge came during a meeting to discuss Russian so-called filtration operations, which involve Ukrainians who are fleeing the war, being forcibly moved to Russia and passing through a series of filtration points. At that time, US Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield said estimates indicated that thousands of children had been subjected to filtration. What's filtration exactly? Filtration is that forcibly moving people? Well, at least Amnesty International has highlighted the plight of unaccompanied, separated, or orphaned children. The US said in August at the UN Security Council that it had evidence that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian citizens had been interrogated, detained, and forcibly deported to Russia in a series of horrors overseen by officials from Russia's presidency. So this is one of the less delightful parts of human nature, that so many can suffer and suffer so horribly because of one group's tendency towards self-promotion. I don't mind a nation saying, yay, rah, rah, we're great. Let's hope we win some medals at the Olympics. But a country saying, rah, rah, we're so great. We have to build our empire. We have to defend ourselves from attack by attacking other people first. I came across that term the other day. Is it called the self-defense complex? I'll have a look. Or the self-defense dilemma. But when used in a military sense. It means I'm going to have to Google military term because I might be getting the term a little wrong. Defense dilemma, okay. Security. It's called the security dilemma. There we go. I found it on Wikipedia. In international relations, the security dilemma, also referred to as the spiral model, is when the increase in one state's security, such as increasing its military strength, leads other states to fear for their own security because they do not know if the security increasing state intends to use its growing military for offensive purposes. Consequently, security increasing measures can lead to tensions, escalation, or conflict with one or more parties. So in Russia's case, because their security measures are a part of a self-promotion exercise in an invasion-style fashion, they can continue to keep claiming that they're just alarmed that the West exists, that the US has such a powerful military, they're like, no, we're just trying to provide an alternative to the dominance of the West. We're trying to make Mother Russia dominant. It's like, yep, your egos are so hurt by America being a geopolitical superpower that you're going to kill thousands and thousands of Ukrainians. You're going to separate family members from each other. You're going to cause untold harm and misery, human suffering and tragedy, so that you can expand Russia. That's not self-defense. That's not security. That's imperialism, and it's a bad thing. So intuitive to some, but worth repeating and reinforcing, just because some people forget. Some people forget, and they're going to keep going back to, why should America concern itself with the affairs of another country? And America needs to concern itself with the ratchet tendencies of Russian imperialism. Sometimes Republicans help Russia, and sometimes conservative media and just corporate media generally help Republicans. And I'm going back to something that happened to help raise awareness. This account, Katie K, says she's wondering who else read Cassidy Hutchinson's deposition transcripts, because the part where she exposes Maggie Haberman has me wondering why MSN hasn't called attention to Ms. Haberman's part in this. Aren't journalists supposed to be unbiased? Sure, but sometimes journalism and journalists get overrun with bad practices, bad habits, and bad motivations. So let's have a look. Jack Smith, special counsel for Trump inquiries, steps up the pace. Sure. That's Maggie, but let's have a look. What's the part of the deposition? This is the interview of Cassidy Hutchinson, released by the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. September the 14th, she was interviewed in 2022. I said, Stefan, was that Maggie Haberman asking about my interview? And he said, yeah, but don't worry, she's not going to make it a big deal. I said, Stefan, I don't want this out there. He said, don't worry, like, Maggie's friendly to us, we'll be fine. So I was just like, whatever, I was annoyed. So, let's read out what Stephen says. According to Cassidy Hutchinson, this is her lawyer, her first lawyer, who was paid for by Trump World. And he answers the phone. He says, Cass, I'm just going to answer. I just need to find out what she's going to talk to me about. He answers, I can't hear what she's saying, but I hear Stefan say, yeah, we just did her third interview. You can put it out, but don't make it too big of a deal. I don't think she'll want it to be too big of a deal. All right, thanks. So that was Stefan talking to Maggie Haberman and instructing her as to what level of deal to make it. Like, here you go, giving you the scoop. Cassidy Hutchinson's done her third interview, but don't make it a big deal. I.e., just put it out there, put these details out there that we feed you, but we don't want anything to be, breaking news. We want to just go, yeah, sure, Trump's inner circle from the Trump administration, they're being interviewed. Obviously, Trump did nothing wrong, da-da-da-da-da. Maggie's friendly to us. We'll be fine. So she is being called out, and journalists who defend that type of practice, access journalists defending the practice of access journalism, where you have a transactional relationship with certain politicians. And the transaction in Maggie Haberman's case is that she spins things to be friendly to Trump World as much as she can. She understands she has to do some breathless, oh no, what have they done now reporting? But ultimately, she helps them with their goals. She helps soften the blow of breaking news that reflects badly on Republicans and reflects badly on people in Trump's orbit. That's who Maggie Haberman is. That's what she does. She's friendly to them. She accepts instructions on whether or not to make something a big deal. I was so happy when Maggie Haberman was called out in popular culture. There was a show called The Boys on Amazon Prime, and superheroes behaved badly, but somebody said, I'll fix this. I'll make it right. I'll get Haberman on the phone. The writers of that show put in a reference, a very specific reference to Maggie Haberman and how she would make something right for someone who had behaved inexcusably, horrifically badly. I'll talk to Haberman. She's the fixer. She's the fixer for a lot of Trumpublicans and conservatives. Roger Stone is her godfather. So when people say, oh, but we're so dependent on Maggie Haberman, she's got the inside scoop. No, Maggie Haberman has the inside scoop on gossip that will distract you from the actual story of corruption. Oh, somebody wrote a story on how the far right's pro-Russia posture endangers the nation and the world. Who wrote this? It's an opinion piece republished from The Hill by Douglas E. Schoen. I don't know him. I don't know her. Throughout the 20th century, American leadership was paramount in pushing back against authoritarian and revisionist dictators who sought to undermine global peace and quash human rights. Both Democrats and Republicans alike recognized that the United States could ill afford to take a passive role on the world stage, as problems in Europe or Asia would eventually make their way to our shore. It was an accepted principle that when democracy was being threatened abroad, America would come to its defense. However, this ideal has come under fire since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Isolationist tendencies have become increasingly prominent on the whiny political right. So I put the word whiny in there. It's not in the article. I'm just saying the contrarians on the political right like to complain about anything. Republicans have been leading the charge to curtail US support for Ukraine. Yes, that's why even though the Democrats did surprisingly well in the midterms, it's still such a heartbreak that Republicans won a thin majority in the House, because it means it becomes much more difficult going forwards to help Ukraine. To say nothing of the fact that Republicans are threatening to cause a default on the debt, throwing the American economy and the world economy into absolute chaos in June. June's not that far away. Those in charge of America's financial system can do what they can to stave off this outcome. But the truth is, there's so many bad faith actors and just destructive nihilists with their hands on the reins of the Republican Party within the House of Representatives, that important part of Congress, that they could very well do this. They can stick a knife in the world economy come June if they won't take steps to expand the debt ceiling, to raise the debt ceiling. And President Joe Biden, tried to call them out, and they haven't named their terms for avoiding this hostage situation, but he tried to say, look, they're talking about cutting welfare, they're talking about cutting Social Security and Medicaid, and they all booed like, don't tell the people that. It's only some of us have been stupid enough to say it out loud or write it down, so don't say that that's what we want to do. It was reported to be part of their ideas about what to try and trade for, trade cuts to Medicaid, trade cuts to Social Security in exchange for not messing up America's financial system by defaulting on the debts and failing to raise the debt ceiling in time for the June default that will happen if they don't. And yeah, crazy is definitely at the wheel of the Republican Party in the House. And some of that does seem to be a function of the slowness, the lethargic pace of America's justice system, in that Matt Gaetz is acting like a crazy person, but he's also under investigation for criminal behavior. And when you are worried that you're going to go to jail or be convicted for a crime or indicted for a crime, it makes you reckless. The stakes are higher for you, and you can do things that will mess the system up just because you are creating chaos purely because accountability is harder to chase in a chaotic system. People can't apply the rules calmly and reasonably if everything is chaotic. So I'm imagining that that's what Matt Gaetz is relying on. That's what potentially Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Andy Biggs and Stephen Scalise, all the people who participated in a seditious plot to overthrow the United States government, allegedly, with a lot of visible evidence of their participation in those crimes. They have not been held to account. There have not been charges. There was a lot of incitement to violence, but the idea of following procedures and not just locking people up willy-nilly has led for a lot of coup instigators to get away scot-free with their actions so far and use their time, their allotted time still in the public eye, with all the freedom that they have at this stage because they haven't been indicted or prosecuted or charged or convicted or anything yet, to create the potential for havoc. So we hope that these investigations proceed apace. We hope that Jack Smith is working as hard as he can, and it does seem like it. There are obstacles that obviously beset those investigations at every turn. Mike Pence is trying to claim not even executive privilege. He's trying to resist a subpoena by Special Prosecutor Jack Smith by claiming that there's a separation of powers legal argument, that then Vice President Mike Pence was acting in a congressional capacity on January the 6th. So he doesn't have to answer a subpoena. What? He doesn't have to answer a subpoena from Jack Smith because that's from the Department of Justice and that's part of the administrative branch. And so that can't subpoena Mike Pence because he was acting from the legislative branch. Because the vice president acts as the ceremonial head of Congress when he counts the Electoral College votes on January the 6th, the date stipulated in the Constitution. Such a bunch of hooey, that argument. Bob posted a TikTok of 4 heroes in Ukraine. One was from Australia, one was from Ireland, one was from Scotland, and one was from the UK. They were EODs. I'm unfamiliar with that abbreviation. Or they searched for mines and bombs. They are heroes. Yes. It's nice to know there are people who are answering the call. What if Nazi Germany type situation was beginning again? What would you do? And those people have said to themselves, we would go and fight to oppose the Nazis. So props to those people. Republicans hate Zelensky for not surrendering to Putin like they did, at Covey_93. So there's a Twitter account, Rhonda Harbison, who is a great Twitter account. She brings receipts. Every time a Republican posts something, she is there with linked articles showing that they have acted corruptly. So whenever they're making accusations about Democrats, people who visit those Twitter accounts will at least be forced to contend with a little bit of the evidence that Rhonda Harbison always brings. Although I saw someone today say they explained to their MAGA friend or their MAGA acquaintance that Donald Trump had signed something rolling back some Obama rules with regards to dangerous goods being transported on trains, because they were very outraged about the dangerous chemical spill in East Palestine in Ohio. And they said to their friend, so you don't believe me? You wouldn't believe me if I showed you proof that Trump signed it, if I had like the papers with me that Trump had signed, revoking the Obama era regulations regarding trains. And the friend agreed. But the thing is, maybe the friend agrees and says that on the surface, no, I wouldn't change my mind even if you showed me the evidence. Maybe they would. I don't know, but it does speak to a high level of resolve. There's people who are so hopped up on MAGA crazy juice right now, or MAGA propaganda juice, that they need to not confront their errors. It threatens to break their brain. They're so afraid of having to confront their own wrongness that they don't need any level of evidence now. Any level of evidence that says they made a mistake, they'll just be like, nope. It's a high quality forgery. I will even if I see Trump say something like, say, get vaccinated, I'll insist that it's a deep fake. They just are so attached to a delusional version of events now that there's nothing you can say or do to talk them out of it. Anyway, I've been talking for a while now. I better go have a drink. Oh, thank you. Christopher's here with the explanation of what EOD stands for. Men, thank you for paying attention to military matters and helping us out with that. Not to say there are not ladies in the military, because I saw that there was an all-female team that did the flyover for the Super Bowl. So I don't want to limit myself to act like there's some kind of intrinsic gender division in terms of being interested in the military, but I personally have not taken enough of an interest. I'm tempted to take more now. Look at me, I can learn what EOD means, explosive ordnance disposal. I'm definitely very behind sending more weaponry to Ukraine. I never thought I would have cheered watching tanks be blown up in the way that I have watched videos and cheered seeing Russian soldiers attacked, even though I feel sorry for people conscripted into the war, into Russia's attack on Ukraine against their will. I feel sorry for protesters thrown into police trucks and conscripted. I hope they find ways to escape that fate. There's always a lot of atrocities involved when one country goes to war for the ignoble purposes of self-promotion, advancing a false narrative about their greatness, trying to restore an empire. Christopher said, women rock, thank you, and take care, and thank you for another awesome show. Bob's worried about the merits of Merrick Garland. I am still hoping it's all going to work out okay, and I think there are a lot of signs that the investigations are proceeding apace. So the Ukrainian weapons we are sending are what's called Lend-Lease. Oh, well, you'll have to explain it to me some more sometime, Bob. Thank you so much for being here and participating in the broadcast today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and gals, for any gals who listen or listen to the replay. And let's talk more military things tomorrow. Cheers and happy Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. All the best. Hi, Pumpkin. I'm going to end the broadcast now, okay? Oh, still haven't ended.